I think that's a fair point too. I think the concept at the heart of these cases is something a lot of people in the general public would also naturally reject. The idea that a gun maker is liable for the criminal actions of a third party when they had no connection to what that did comes off as wrong to most people on a sort of basic level. You obviously hear a lot of the comparisons to trying to sue Ford if a drunk driver hits you. Similar idea there, and I think people have a natural opposition to that. So that, I think that's a good point. For me, when I think about this case, I just keep coming back to the calculation that these insurers made. I don't really fully understand it. I can look at it and say, well, they came up with the idea. They're just doing a numbers game. They don't care about the politics or the implications for the gun industry of a settlement like this. They just want to. They're risk adverse, right? Naturally, as insurers, and they are going to come in. They're going to calculate. Okay, here's what our percentage of losing this case is, and having to pay out a big penalty at the end versus plus, and then add that to what we're going to pay in legal fees over the course of fighting this case, and the uncertainty of whether or not the Supreme Court would come to our aid if we did get unfavorable juries or judges along the way. And at the end of it, that number they came up with was higher than $73 million that they ended up paying. But, it's just so hard to look at the argument in the case and imagine why they felt it was likely enough that they would lose on the merits to do this.
And again, I think this is probably where it really was a cost-benefit analysis. You look at the lawsuit that some of the families filed in Parkland, Florida, against the federal government for failing to prevent that attack. And I think the federal government settled for $127 million. Because in part the FBI did not send on a warning about the killer there to the FBI field office in Miami, just kind of sat on that information. The families of the Sutherland Springs victims sued the Air Force, and I think they also either obtained a verdict or got a settlement of over $100 million. So that, those may have been calculations on the part of the insurers too, looking at the payouts. Now, granted, this is the federal government we're talking about, but still looking at those similar payouts and saying, okay, we could very easily be looking at a, $100+ million a verdict, and if they don't agree to this, we could be looking at a $100+ million settlement. So let's offer them the full, what it would cost us if we paid out every claim in full and see what happens. And in that case, the insurers may have saved themselves, $25 million+ dollars. I don't know if that was a factor, but I did look up those numbers for Sutherland Springs and Parkland the other day because I was curious to see how they compared, and they were both much bigger settlements than what we saw actually with the Remington case.
Yeah, and you're probably right. Like that probably is what you would look at in a case like this, the similar circumstances as far as the tragic nature of these events and the horrific nature of these attacks. But obviously, you look at the cases and you, at least as, neither one of us are lawyers. So, I don't know how this would go over in court, other than that we've watched a lot of these cases play out through the years. But it seems like the Sutherland Springs families and the Parkland families had better cases because there was actual negligence on the part of the FBI or the Air Force in both those cases. Like their actions conceivably directly led to this event happening, or at least it allowed for it to happen. Whereas the case against Remington is so much more of a stretch in terms of the arguments there. We've gone over it already a couple times here, but like there's no evidence that that the shooter in this case saw any of this advertising, and then even if he had, he wasn't the one who bought the gun anyway. It was his mother whom he stole it from and killed in order to go on this rampage. And then looking at the actual advertisements they're talking about too, is the consider your man card reissued advertisement like gauche or like kind of stupid? Sure. Does it encourage people to commit mass murder? No. It's hard to understand why they felt like they were at least likely enough to lose this case, that they agreed to pay out such a huge settlement without ever even going to the merits. They didn't even test this in court at all. And that's where it gets confusing to me. That's all.